A very good afternoon to our dear esteemed viewers. Welcome back to this week's another episode of the Community Show. Here today we are discussing tribalism in Uganda. And right next to me, or joining me to discuss this very intriguing and interesting conversation, is a panel of experts who are going to go ahead and introduce themselves, and we can dive straight into the conversation. I'll begin with you, Mr. Timothy. Kindly go ahead and introduce yourself. Let the panelists or the viewers know who you are, and then we can let the other subsequent panelists do the same, and we start the conversation. Thank you very much, and you're most welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Timothy Balikenga. I'm a human rights activist for a number of over 10 years in the area of human rights and law and governance. And I'm happy to be here today.
Very happy to have you here, Timothy. We're looking forward to having a very interesting and wonderful discussion with you. Let's over to you, Mike. Kindly go ahead and introduce yourself, and so the viewers get to know who exactly we are talking to. Mike, you're most welcome.
Mike Kassola. My name is Mike Kassola, the Managing Director of Advocates of Common Good. I'm actually concerned about human rights. Thank you so much for this discussion. The chairperson of Advocates of Common Good. I'm actually concerned about human rights, and this topic actually addresses a number of issues of human rights. And thank you so much. I pray that it is successful so that it is useful to our country and ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let us get to Mr. Obich. Mr. Obich, kindly come in, unmute, and introduce yourself so that the viewers get to know you. Well, it looks like Mr. Obich hasn't gotten the microphone as yet. Armstrong, you joined us and you had you joined us. Kindly go ahead and introduce yourself so that we can begin the conversation. Armstrong, over to you. I will start with you, Mr. Mike. You mentioned that the conversation relating to human rights is one that interests you so much. And if I read your bio and I got it right, you are an anthropologist. And I definitely know if we are to trace back the conversation to our history, you can give us an understanding of how exactly we can relate this to the historical context. So my question to you, therefore, is kindly explore the historical roots of tribalism in Uganda. How did different ethnic entities develop, and what role did colonialism play in shaping these identities? Mr. Mike Kassola, most welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. You remember very well before the colonialists came in 1884. Uganda and Africa was divided between states. Bugisu, where I come from, was a state. Buganda was a state. Busoga was a state. Bunyoro was a state. And people lived in that kind of arrangement. They lived in the tribes under chiefdoms. So one, it was for protection against war, because at all times there was annexation of one territory after the other. Two, people felt they felt quite comfortable to be close to each other, especially when you speak a language that is understood by the people within the environment. For not only for security, but also food. People. Food and all basic necessities you required to be close to your people. And when the colonialists came, under the 1900 agreement, they created a state called Uganda. That means converging all tribes and causing one unit called Uganda. But still, this one did not affect the integration so much. People remained under ethnic groupings. Generally, people in Africa, because of their former methods of work and the way of living, I think they felt very secure to be close to each other in terms of tribes. Now, after independence, this thing has not changed so much. People have remained under groupings of that arrangement. People feel secure, economically, socially secure if they are under a tribe. In the 1960s, if you remember very well, the colonialists preferred to work with people from northern Uganda, especially in terms of military. There were some parameters they used, which have been, of course, demystified. It was believed. Hello? After colonialism and getting independence in Uganda, people have still lived under that arrangement of security. They feel secure being close to each other, both in terms of economic security, in terms of physical security, and they prefer actually to work with each other in terms of tribes. In 1960, of course, prior to that, we had an army in Uganda, for instance. We had an army in Uganda. The British came up with a certain parameter which has been demystified. They believed that somebody to work in the army must be tall, gigantic, you know, which of course has been demystified. And it was found out that most of the people who were of that category came from northern Uganda, and most of them joined the army. And now the politicians then used that as an excuse to keep themselves in power, recruit only people from northern Uganda. Like, I will give you an example. During the first Obote government, we had so many people who came from northern Uganda to manage the army. During Idi Amin's time, we had many names coming from West Nile. People like Ali Fadul, people like Mustafa Adresi, people like Moses Ali, people like Maria Mungo, people like Nasuru. These were the people controlling the army. And one of the reasons for that is that the politicians in the government also feel very insecure to work with people outside. And but of course, this is all deception, because what we have discovered is that even the people within your tribe are the ones who remove you from power. During the Obote's regime, the second Obote regime, I started understanding the world better. Most of the people were from northern Uganda. People were like David Oito Jok, people like Tito Okello, people like Bazirio Okello, people like Odur, people like Oyet, and many others. Can you imagine that after the death of David Oito Jok, out of so many people who were in the army who qualified to be chiefs of staff, Dr. Obote had selected upon a Jack to be in charge of the army, to be the chief of staff. Come to the government today. Most of the people are from Western Uganda, and that's where President Museveni comes from. Initially, when this one was brought to the press, to the public, when the press brought this to the public, the excuse was that this army is historically Western Uganda. But time has gone, and it has been proven that it's not only a historical connotation, but it's tribal. People like Akandwanaho, people like Koreta, people like Nyakairima, people like Mbadi, people like Tinyefuza, people like Charigonza, people like Kashirinji, people like Kashaka, people like Kanyankore, people like Muhozi, people like Karuhanga, Mujira, all are from Western Uganda. Does it mean that only people in Western Uganda can manage the army? The answer is no. The answer is no. The reason being that President Museveni is no different from any other politician in Africa who feels secure working with the people close to him. But as I said earlier, it doesn't make much sense, because when you look at the recent history in the country called the Guinea-Bissau, the person who toppled the president was his cousin. In Gabon recently, the person who toppled the president is his cousin. So all this one does not work. But generally speaking, we have tribalism in Africa. How to go about it is a matter of discussion, and I think that one now informs our debate. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mike. You give us a very interesting perspective from a historical point of view, which therefore I would like to invite Mr. Timothy to pick up from there to drive the conversation. Still, maybe if he has an introduction to this conversation or give a historical perspective too, you feel free and come in. But you've given us a very wonderful historical context to this conversation. Timothy, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you, colleagues and the listeners, for this who are listening to us at this time. Purely, if you look at right away from history of humanity, the issue of tribal inclination, the issue of people being close to those whom they associate with because of their belonging to the same tribe, originates as humanity. I can trace it up from that level. If you go to those who read the Bible, you'll even observe that Jesus himself visited most times people who are close from the family of his mother, Mary. So it is something that we cannot remove from humanity. So it is something that, but then the other thing that I would want to mention is how do we live in that situation? And again, we live together as people that belong to the same nation, that belong to the same community, despite the different tribes that we belong to. My colleague has mentioned it from the colonial era. Yes, people are divided, but people still maintained their tribal inclination. Up to current, it is the same thing. This has governed all systems. He has mentioned the political part of it, but also it has mentioned the other spheres of life. Economically, socially, people would want to associate more with people from their tribes. All of these have been, even you look at the business area, you find people love buying from the shops that are managed by their people from their tribes. You'll find the Indians here buying from the same Indians. You'll find all of these things as something that has happened not only in the political world, but also in other spheres of life. My point is, how do we live in this scenario, in this situation of where people belong to their different tribes, but still we must focus on the national good, on the common good that interests everyone. That would be my point of where I would like that, despite the different tribes, because we cannot remove it from there, but how do we serve the national good? That would be my area that I would want us to focus on. Otherwise, the issue of tribal inclination, we are not going to remove it from this situation. If you look at the background my colleague has given, you can't remove it. If you look at from a historical part that I've given from the area of, if you look at even from the level of Christianity, the historical part, the tribal part has been there. That's why here with the 12 tribes, that means you see who are the favorite tribes. Even God mentioned the favorite tribes. So that's why it means it's something we cannot go with. But we have to find that alongside all that, how do we live together and how do we focus on the common good? Now, if our point is focusing on the common good.
Well, looks like we have lost our brother Timothy, but let me get to Armstrong. Armstrong, are you now with us? Kindly unmute and...
I am very glad to have joined this debate. I have been getting technical hitches here and there, but I'm glad that I'm finally through. Just a bit of introduction. My name is Armstrong David Kurho. I am a student of law at Makerere University, and I am very glad to be part of this debate that I think shapes a lot about what is happening in our country's political affairs, but most importantly about how we relate as communities that belong to different identities in this country. I'm glad to be part of you. And the moderator asked the question. I didn't hear it quite well. I don't know if you can repeat what you said, Douglas. Can I have a
My question
again,
to
sir?
you is in line of, as a form of your introductory remark. Yes, I'm saying as a form of your introductory remark, stemming from
Yes,
what
please.
Mr. Timothy and Mr. Mike Kassola were talking about, from giving us a historical perspective. Kindly, in your opinion, also provide for us what you think of the topic, but also if you have a historical perspective, you can give us as well. You're most welcome.
Oh, thank you very much. For me, the history part of it, I think my colleague has given it. However, my own perception of this debate is different. For me, I do not think that we have tribalism as has been put in the debate. Because the issue of tribalism for me is not as big as it has been portrayed. For me, it goes down to individuals. This is an individual affair, or if I should call it an affair that we can only restrict to a small group of people, and not necessarily a tribe. If you go back to history, my colleague mentioned the issue of Uganda and how the Baganda, for example, at some point had, if I should call it, favor way back after colonialism. But I do not think this was entirely a Uganda affair. This was an affair that I would connect to individuals. Just like I wouldn't want the current debate to look at tribalism in terms of a tribe. I want us to break down the subject to an issue of a small group of a given community and not just a tribe. Because when you look at it in the perspective of a tribe, you are very misguided. Thank you.
All right, Armstrong. Thank you very much. I was saying, if I told you having troubles with your submissions, you can turn off the video and then just use you. But thank you very much for that wonderful introductory remark. Let me now get back to Mr. Mike Kassola. Mr. Mike Kassola, you give us a very wonderful historical context, moving from way back to the colonial era, and then you bring it back to the contemporary society. But your historical context is more related to the political landscape, which then informs my second question. Mr. Mike, the question help us analyze the influence of tribalism on Uganda's politics, just from your historical perspective. How does that go ahead and influence, how does tribalism influence our national politics? Mr. Mike Kassola, you're welcome.
Thank you. Tribalism has a very big impact on the political landscape. First of all, Ugandans as people are not themselves tribal. I'll give you an example. Drake, I don't know you. I don't think that you come from Masabaland, but I don't have any problem. I don't have any problem with a person from Ankole. I don't have any problem with a person from Lango. Neither do I have a problem with a person from Karamoja and any other part of Uganda. Not at all. Me as me and my friends. They are not tribal. And actually, when you go to other places, you'll find that people integrate very freely. The only problem we have is that leaders feel insecure. I don't know whether it's because of lack of democracy in some situations, but people feel insecure and would like to work with the people close to them. I worked with a public institution. By then, we used to have telecommunications. Most of the people in that institution, I loved them very closely, were people from Busoga and people from Ankole. And people anybody who was very close to me was my friend. But when it comes to leadership, that's when the political dynamics come in. People feel insecure. And also now the common man feels also a sense of false consciousness. A sense of false consciousness. He feels that when the person his tribe is in power, I think he's secure. He will go to an office, knock, and somebody opens very, very, very easily. So that one influences. Like, look at it now. When the president is you know that in Ankole he gets a block of vote, not because of anything, not that Ankole themselves are tribal, but they feel they want to be very close to their pastor. I was around during the time of 1980 when we had elections in Uganda. UPC, Uganda People's Congress, got 7 unopposed seats from Lango. 7 unopposed seats. Actually, all of the seats which were unopposed were from Lango. And the purpose was simple. The people felt secure. They felt also.
Mr. Mike Kassola, I just briefly want to engage you on that ground of on how you bring in the perspective of UPC. Relating to, for example, the National Unity Platform, arguments have been raised that you see National Unity Platform has only gained momentum in Uganda and did not have the capacity of gaining momentum in other regions and from other tribes. Does that therefore possibly inform the decision that tribalism informs political parties, but also informs the politics of our country?
When you look at National Unity Platform, the matter actually is very different. The matter is very different. By the way, when you look at the younger generation and the country at large, I have been telling people that people don't have a lot of love for Honorable Chagulanyi. The only reason you see crowds around him is that the country has been stifled in terms of democracy. You know, when a river is blocked and it finds its way into your Canada garden, it will sweep them away very, very strongly. So not that the people really love Chagulanyi so much, but they feel democracy has been stifled, and you know there is a vacuum. When a vacuum is there, it must be filled. So what you are seeing here is not actually tribal. Look at people in Lango, people in Ankole, people in Karamoja. They are really welcoming Chagulanyi so much. This one is not a tribal matter. Well, we can say that in the previous election, they got seats in Buganda. In Masabaland, they got 1 seat. Honorable Nambeshe is a member of the National Unity Platform. But I can say attribute this to the level of entrenchment of NRM in the politics of Uganda. Otherwise, it would have been that they get seats everywhere. So there is a problem here. It's not tribal, it's about democracy and the stifling of democracy. People want a breathing space. There are people who simply say, we want simply to see a change of government, whether it is good or it is bad. So those are all running behind Chagulanyi. But apart from that, tribalism still exists. But as individuals, as my brother, the previous speaker was saying, it doesn't really go into the core of the Uganda, the country, because tribalism would mean, if we looked at it that way, that tribalism is in this country on a large scale, I would only buy something from a person from my place. But that is not the case. Ugandans are not tribal. no Ugandan tribe is tribal here. Look at Baganda. So the issue of national unity platform cannot be called a tribal matter, because in any case, most of the people who went to the bush were either Banyankole or Baganda. And Baganda have been supporting President Museveni for a long time, until recently when they disagreed. I think they have disagreed on some very, very simple, some pertinent issues. That's why, that's one of the reasons. And secondly, as I said earlier, people want some breathing space. If there was a breathing space, there were term limits in this country, the change of government here. I don't think the crowds that Kyagulanyi is carrying around him would be a very big one. In any case, when you look at it this way again, this crowd which is now following Kyagulanyi is the same crowd that was following Besigye. Besigye is a Munyankole. And so, if they denied Kyagulanyi and followed Besigye, I would say maybe there is tribalism. Or if they denied Besigye and are following now Kyagulanyi, but I think that because they discovered that Besigye is not delivering them to Canaan as they expected, so they want somebody else who has the vigor and the speed to move them to Canaan, the expected land. So that is how I look at it anyway. Ugandans themselves on a large scale, Ugandans by and large are not tribal people. They are simply, they love each other. It's only leaders, it's politics which is bringing about these people fighting for resources to come nearer to their homes.
All right, thank you very much. You, what you highlight in your submission is something very crucial that I think I would love to engage Timothy on. You assert that Ugandans are not tribal. It's the politics that is fueling the tribalism, which you say that Ugandans love each other and we are not tribalistic people, but the politics is one or the other influencing that. Let's have Timothy come.
Drake, let me clear this.
Yes.
It is a politics that is bringing out something near that looks like tribalism. But we can't call it tribalism. It looks like tribalism. The key thing I talked about is there is a vacuum which must be filled. And that's why you find that so many people were following Besigye when he came up charismatically to contest against the status quo. Yeah. And when people discovered that they were not being taken to Canaan very fast, like they wanted, the whole group has now gone to Kyagulanyi. Today, if Besigye stood with Kyagulanyi, still you'd find that this vote is divided, because the guys have got charisma, and I think you know what happens when people are desperate. They want to move fast. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that clarity. Timothy, just from the conversation right now is focused on the political landscape in our country. Mr. Mike Kassola just gives us a very wonderful insight on that we have something similar that looks like tribalism that is being fronted by politics, which informs my second question. Timothy, kindly unmute and engage us on how have ethnic identities been used in political campaigns, party affiliations, and governance. Timothy.
Yeah, thank you, colleagues and the listeners. One of the things that I will mention is that the issue is that the politicians have been looking for opportunities of where ethnic minorities, ethnic groups are being sided with for the politicians to win their side. Not that the people are tribalistic, but the individual politicians try to convince the people on lines of ethnicity, so that one, they use them to divide and win the other side. Not that the people are tribalistic. I will try to bring out at that is that the particular politicians use that to look at a certain particular tribe, try to see what this particular community would want, talk about them, which the current leadership maybe is not talking about, then win that support. Then it looks like tribal, but which is not the case. Why would I say that? Is that my colleague has just mentioned some names as coming from the western side. But I have seen that those names may not be significantly changing the tribal thinking, but only that maybe when they find that there is something they can win on their side, they try to front the assumed issues of that particular tribe, which sometimes are not even the issues. So for me, that's one thing I've seen. If I can give an example, if you look at 2021 general elections, you would find that certain politicians would be looking at certain tribes and certain communities and say, this particular community, I would think this is what I'm going to give you. And obviously, communities would rally behind that person because, as mentioned, what is their interest. And then the other side would look as if this person has become tribal, but it is not. It is the distribution of the resources that is bringing out all these. So I think one of the things that would look at is how do we look at the common good? The common good would be common for everyone as a nation. It would not be for specific communities. It would not be for specific this. Just like if we look at roads, how do we ensure that all the country is served with roads? You would not hear anyone saying, we need a president from our tribe, we need this from our tribe. No, because the roads are evenly distributed. So when there is an equal distribution of resources, it looks then the politicians use that area as a point to amplify one area where resources are not there at the moment, then take up from there and it looks tribal. So the point is not that Ugandans are not tribal, but specific individuals who have taken up political positions or who want political positions use those gaps to bring up the people's views as if then they look tribal. But that is one of the things that I look at. But then one of the other things that I'd look at is, as a country, as a nation, if we look at redistribution, distributing common interests, common services, common social services, services like roads, schools, hospitals, if they are redistributed, if every district is served with that hospital, with a road, with water, with schools, then you'll not hear anyone mentioning of tribal. But if the politicians start focusing where they are coming from, others also want to talk about where the things are not there, then to look versus this. So it looks tribal. So that's the whole thing. So there is no issue, particular issue of tribal, but there is the issue of individual interests that focus on certain locations and forget others. So that's why I'm looking at that. And purely what happens is that individuals have ended up serving areas where they are coming from, and has definitely those areas where they're coming from, then the whole thing looks like tribal. But which would it be? These are individual situations. Because even when you move, at the moment, my colleague mentioned that the western side are taking up the leadership. But if you move to the western side, people are not even with the resources as you'd think. If you move to the northern side, with the time of Obote, not everyone had the resources. So meaning the thing is not tribal, the thing is individual. So what, as the nation, we must fight an element of individualism and then find, look for an element of a common good. Look at the Uganda we want, the Uganda for all of us, not the Uganda for you as an individual. Maybe that's what I would submit.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Timothy. You bring a very interesting argument to this debate, which is focused on the aspects to do with, we need to look at the common good, because once we have functional roads, once we have functional hospitals, functional schools, then definitely people will not raise issues to do with tribalism because everyone is served right. Let us now get to Obich, Dennis. I hope right now your network has settled and you're ready to submit on this matter. Then I can come to Armstrong. Dennis, kindly come and submit on the issue of tribalism in our political landscape. What are your thoughts? Are they any different from the submissions of Mr. Kassola and Mr. Timothy? What do you think? Obich, Dennis, you're most welcome. Kindly unmute and make your submissions.
I had the technical glitch, but I'm happy now. I'm on. I've had some 2, 3, 4 submissions,
Kindly turn your, excuse me, Mr. Dennis, kindly turn your camera to face you.
For introduction, I'm Mr. Obich, Dennis Awio. I'm a politician and an accountant by training, and I'm also a human rights activist. I come from Lango, and right now I'm talking from Lango. About the topic, I'm not very far from what people have been saying, but all in all, what I see as tribalism is coming up as a result of inadequate resources. And you know, in politics, people fight for resources, and if you can go to the definition of politics, politics is a management of society. And in managing society, there is always a allocation of resources. And in our case, I see that it is inadequate resources that bring in greed. And with the greed, people have competed to have resources brought to their people, and this creeps in tribalism as I observe, because in another time to fight for the few resources we have, even people who have not contributed to these resources, but you know, all citizens contribute to our resources by paying taxes from various services offered, and we would always want to have all these resources, but you find in our attempt to get these resources, tribalism creeps in, like you see in our parliament. Now people like in our language, somebody during the campaigns would struggle. I'm for NRM. If I go there, because I'm in NRM, I will get resources for you. I will talk directly to the president, and I get resources allocated to you people. And I find this is not very appropriate. If our policy was good, if our policy was good, we would get all these resources allocated to us, irrespective of where you come or irrespective of whoever you support. And you know, when we got back my parties in Uganda, people tend towards NRM now so that they can get resources for their people. But to me, I feel if our people were good enough, we would not go for all this. Our parliament would only allocate resources according to the number of people in an area, and according to the need of such an area. Like we don't have equal resources, equal distribution of infrastructure, the roads, the hospitals, the schools are not equally distributed. And because of greed, we find our government going to support areas like there was a school built in Tanzania, and there's a school built in Rwanda. Yet, when you look in our yeah, you'll find people being reported every other day. Our children still studying and please, school roofs being blown off by wind and storm, but you find it can take like even 2-3 years before being replaced. But our resources have been allocated and given to places which are not supposed to be left by us, yet we still feel.
Mr. Dennis, I would just like to now cut you there and bring in Mr. Armstrong. You highlight very interesting insights and bring in very interesting perspective to this conversation. But you argue that, see, we should focus on, first of all, having our social, our government should focus on delivering social services instead of focusing on identity politics that would in turn not serve the people and the interest of Ugandans. Which I would just like to catch you there and bring Mr. Armstrong on issues to do with violence and conflict and violence. Mr. Armstrong, just from what my brother, Mr. Obich Dennis, was talking about, he highlights that just similarly to your argument earlier, that we ought to focus on delivering on grounds of social services, and people will not have raised even wouldn't be discussing such conversations. Now, my question to you is, do you have instances in this country where we see tribalism leading to conflict and violence? Or like, what do you think? Or what were the causes, if they were there, where we see extreme violence and conflict? Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you. You see, right from the beginning, I mentioned that for me, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Proceed.
Okay. Right from the beginning of this debate, I mentioned that for me, the issue of tribalism doesn't arise as it is being portrayed in the media and generally in the public domain. What we have are cases where individuals, and I want to repeat, individuals misuse their power, their positions to favor people of their interests. And I wouldn't want this to be looked at in the perspective of a tribe. Let us look at this in the perspective of an individual. If me as Nkuruho happen to have a brother that I employ, I have employed this brother of mine as Nkuruho. I'm not employing this brother of mine as a Munyankore. If a certain Ocheng employs his brother in whichever company it is, this Ocheng is employing this brother of his not on behalf of his tribe, but on his individual basis. And therefore, I would want us to look at this debate not in terms of tribes, because when you go tribal, we cause problems and even affect people in these tribes that have not in any way benefited from what we think they benefit from. I have been running an argument with friends that the idea, for example, that the Banyankore have been favored by this government is a blanket statement. We have got very many Banyankore on the streets of Kampala. Very many Banyankore who do not afford a single meal even in a day. And therefore, if you make a blanket statement and say that the Banyankore have benefited from this government in that kind of sense, then you are misleading people. You are to cause an unnecessary tension against the Banyankore. And therefore, I repeat once again, we need to look at it in terms of individuals. And I've said also before that contrary to what my brother said, I think for me, President Museveni has tried to have a level of government. If you look at different government agencies, recently there was a report about people who escorted the vice president and the prime minister to a UN assembly. And if I remember the report and these names that I read, I don't know so much about the authenticity of that report. But if you look through this report, they are about like 3 Banyankore out of about 20 people that I read in the papers. And therefore, it's unfortunate that the debate on tribalism is dwelling so much on the election of the Banyankore, when necessarily it's not
Armstrong,
true. Yes, please.
Let me just engage you there briefly. You see, the sentiment that people are holding is that in almost all government entities that you head into, you'd find that most of them are occupied by persons from southwestern Uganda, be it in the police, be it in the army. Now that informs the layman's argumentation that the Banyankole are the one running this. Hence, they conclude that there is an aspect of tribalism. So how would you then inform that person who thinks that if they go to a particular institution of the government, they will find someone from the southwest, and for them to be helped, they need to know someone from there, what they term as the Gambanogu. So what do you have to say on that?
No, this is not true. You just started by mentioning the police. The IGP, the IGP is not from the southwestern region. Just going by that example, because you see, this debate has been running without figures. People just making statements, subjective statements without facts. And of course, you know what happened, especially with social media. Once something has been has become part of the public, and even without facts, people talk about it. This is how things are. Unless you interrogate the facts behind these allegations, you will remain as subjective as this person that makes these allegations. So I want to be clear on this. Most of these reports are biased. And like you mentioned, you just started by mentioning the police force. The head of the police, the head of the police force does not come from Western Uganda. And as well as very many other government agencies, including talk about NSSF, talk about the DPP's office, talk about ministers. If you want to look at it politically, this government is revolted. Recently, there was a list of permanent secretaries. I don't know if you happen to look at that list. If you look at that list and keenly look at the names and where they come from, then you are likely to realize that most of this biased information that people spread had better be condemned in the interests of national unity. So I want to mention that. Yes, please.
I just want to cut you and bring in Mr. Mike. Your point has been brought home, and I see there are very many hands being brought up. It looks like you have sparked up an interesting debate. Let us hear from Mr. Mike Kassola, then I'll get to Mr. Timothy. I think it's still on the same issue. Then maybe I'll get back to you, Armstrong, and have Dennis coming. Mr. Mike, your hand is up. I think you want to submit on the same.
Yes, I want to say something. Mr. Nkuruho came out very, very clearly, and I was very happy that he said that there is no tribalism in Uganda. Actually, we are at convergence there. There is no tribalism in Uganda on a large scale. But then, I think he contradicts himself on figures. The truth is that Museveni, as an individual, has tried to favor people of Ankole more than any other tribe in Uganda. And we have statistics to support this. I came up with a very long list of people who are under command. That was just a drop in the sea. But I think as Ankole, people of Ankole, and I want to repeat this, including
Mike, are you with us? Well, it looks like I've briefly lost Mike. When he comes back on, I'll get back to you because you are still submitting on the same. Timothy, your hand was up as well. Would you like to submit on the same?
Yeah, thank you, colleagues, for that submission. But for me, my interest, I would want us to focus on service delivery and forget who brings the service. I wouldn't think I would be comfortable whether it's a Musoga who is delivering as long as the service reaches the delivers the service. But we shall definitely forget the service. So the issue should be, how do we deliver a service in a multi-ethnic situation? How do we deliver services? In all this situation, how do we deliver services? And people's life, communities' life can change. Citizens' life can change. So let's not focus on who is delivering the service, but do we need the service there, and has the service reached the people? But otherwise, one thing we shall not remove from humanity is inclination to a tribe, inclination to a family. That is part of the nature of the human beings. But is the services reaching the people, and who delivers it? That would be not a very big thing. So why do services fail to reach the people? It's not by tribe. There are other issues apart from being tribalistic. Because if we are to look at that, the names you are mentioning, but in those areas people are suffering. So the issue is the service, not the tribe.
If the issue is not the tribe, but if the issue here is not the tribe, and then the issue is on service delivery, people would argue, or that person in the community would have this view that the people who are delivering, or who are supposed to deliver these resources, are from a particular community or from a particular region. Are they therefore right to go ahead and point fingers and say, because that is what fuels tribalism? Because we have had argumentations in our communities. People, the border keep, when you take a border, you hear border man saying, I don't want to use what they say, but there's a way they refer to the people from the region that they have taken over the resources. So what should we then therefore be the issue? Because if for you the matter is not about the people, but rather on service delivery, how can we then help inform those people to deliver for the greater good of the community rather than focus on themselves and from a region alone?
Okay, dear my presenter, look at this scenario. Where does the vice president of this country come from now? And we have only one vice president. So do you mean the people from her area have received the services because they have a president? That wouldn't be the case. Mr. Mbadi comes from Kasese. You think everyone from Kasese is now in the army, in the high-ranking army? No. The issue is how do we deliver services, and delivering these services, the issue that is limiting the services is corruption, which is an individual issue, not a tribal issue.
Okay, thank you. Let's get quickly. Let me get the thoughts of Dennis. Then I come back to you, Mr. Armstrong. Looks like we have briefly lost Mr. Kassola, but when it comes back, he will submit on the set. Mr. Dennis, I want us to take the conversation as we approach towards the end of the conversation on the line of social and economic disparities. My question to you is, how has tribalism contributed to social and economic disparities in Uganda, in your view?
I've seen it has contributed tremendously because if you see how our infrastructure development is done, it is very tribalistic.
Dennis, kindly turn off your video and use your audio alone. It looks like the video is affecting the audio.
Okay.
Yes.
I turn off the video.
Yes, and use the audio.
Thank you. Now I'm saying I've seen tribalism has really affected our resource allocation and the social services tremendously, especially from around 1990 up to present, because it seems as Uganda grew, the population also became grew more, and resources became very little for us, and that has made allocation resources to be equitable or distributed equally to Uganda. And now, for you to get resources, you have to be tribalistic and also seek favors from whoever is in control or whoever is in charge of those resources. You have to be what? They tend to be tribalistic, allocating those resources. And if you see like somebody wants to be minister so that they can allocate resources and infrastructure development in their areas, you hear people during campaign saying, if you send me there, I'm already a minister, continue getting the resources we have, you will have the roads, you will have the schools, you have everything. And recently there was a research carried out, I think either by UNRWA or Ministry of Works, and like our place here, Lango, we have only 3% of all tarmac roads in Uganda. And we find this has been done deliberately to frustrate our businesses and so many other service delivery because we don't have any good road. The only tarmac road we have is the Great North Road, which has come through Soroti via Lango, going to Chole and going into Sudan. So I'm thinking tribalism has really affected us, and to us here, we think because we had a president from this side, and it has been mentioned in other forums that why didn't they develop when they had a president? So we think this is really tribalistic for such comments to come from people who are in charge and who are supposed to allocate these resources for the development of Uganda as a whole. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. We have all reached the top of the hour, but quickly before we conclude on this debate, Mr. Armstrong, it looks like there was a rebuttal coming in from Mr. Mike Kassola before he dropped off and was about to give us statistics because he was trying to show you that statistically the institutions of most of our government, or the government institutions, have been largely occupied from people from the southwestern region, which initially raises concerns from Ugandans that is a spark of tribalism. Maybe quickly you can respond to that, but then also give us your concluding remarks as we wind up the conversation.
Thank you very much, Douglas. You see, again, I disagree with him. Because like I mentioned, this is a debate which has been running without figures. And generally, if you are saying that most of our government jobs are offered to a specific tribe, and you cannot have figures to this effect, then you are not likely to convince me. You need to have figures to be able to substantiate what we are talking about. And I tried to give scenarios of the leadership of most of these agencies. I tried to mention the cabinet. President Museveni tries as much as possible to pick his cabinet from across the country so that they know he's running a government where he can be able to know what takes place in every part of this country. Just minutes ago, my brother mentioned the poor roads in Lango, and he associates that tribalism. For me, that's really a very unfortunate comment for him to make. In Bushenyi, where he comes from recently, there is a road that goes through Shema and then goes to Rupunjiri. This road has been in the budget for the last, I think, 6 years. And recently, when the report came of the roads that are going to be worked on, this road was not there. And then I asked, so they said the government did not have enough, and therefore they considered which roads, which priorities, which roads to have as priorities, and then this road was halted. I don't know in which budget it will come. So it's not that the western region takes a big share at the expense of other parts of the country. This is a subjective debate, and which, as a country, we need to cut short in the interest of national unity, and to make sure we do not go back to our ugly past. If you look at the preamble of our constitution, it reminds us of what we need to do to avoid mistakes that have been made in the past. And for me, anybody that attempts or promotes tribalism, when he cannot justify the claims he makes, is one person Uganda should not listen to, because he will not add so much as a country, but he will instead take us back to the ugly history that we are trying to shed off. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. Can you just quickly give us your concluding remarks as well as we get to the end of the conversation?
Yes, thank you. My conclusion is simple. I want to re-add to what I had said before. Tribalism is not as it is. Instead of discussing tribalism, I want us to discuss incompetencies of some individuals, corruption of some individuals. Corruption is there in this government, undeniably. This is not a tribal matter. This is an individual problem. And for me, whether you are a Mkonjo, whether you are a Minyankore, whether you are a Muganda, whether you are a Musoga, if you are corrupt, then you are against this country. And you should be held responsible as an individual. So once again, I mentioned that the issue of tribes is not there. The issue of tribalism is not there. Let us look at it in terms of individual competencies. It can be a Muganda, it can be a Musoga, it can be anybody. And once this person does whatever they do, let us not look at what the incompetencies in terms of the tribes they come from. Secondly, if you mention tribalism, and the debate, and look at that debate in terms of the Banyankure against other parts of the country, then you make the Banyankore so worried, especially if you come in requesting for their political support. You are saying all the Banyankore have benefited from this country at the expense of other tribes. Yet there are very many Banyankore who are suffering or who are going through what other majority of Ugandans are going through. And therefore, you are scaling this Banyankore. You are saying, we know you have benefited so much from this government. In the event that this government is down and we come in, we are going to revenge against you, or we shall put you aside. So what are you saying? You are telling this Banyankore, even when they are not necessarily benefiting from this government, try as much as possible to protect it, because they know, even when you come in, you are not going to help them. You already have that misguided.
Mr. Armstrong, I'd just like to catch you there because we are time bound. Let me engage the rest and then we wind up.
Thank you, Douglas, for giving me this time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for those very wonderful submissions. Obich, Dennis, kindly, see your hand is up. Kindly come and wind up. Give us your concluding remarks so that I can close up with Timothy and call it a discussion. Dennis?
I wanted to inform my friend from Bushenyi that with him he has waited for this Rukungiri Bushenyi Road. They have waited for only 60 years, but at least that was not a very long time. With us, we have had roads which has been as old as the NRM government has been in place. There are Makerere Road, Kidum Road. Then we have had this one, Dokoro Namasale. We have had this one, Lira Beam, which has been on the budget of Uganda with the token figures for as long as NRM has lived. So you are very lucky, but conclusively, I'm saying I would urge if we would have the forum just to educate our leaders so that they would work for all Ugandans and not work for individual regions and for individual constituencies. Because what is bringing problem to us and making politics look bad, just the greed and the tendency of wanting to get it for all, for individual people and leave others to suffer. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. If I were to speak like Armstrong, he would say, let us hold individual people accountable and not look at tribes. But nonetheless, those are very interesting conversations and very interesting insights. Let's conclude with Mr. Timothy. Most welcome.
Yeah, thank you, colleagues. For me, my last take from here is that, colleagues, the whole thing is focusing on the common good, which is good for everyone, regardless of where this person comes from. Common good will mean that we do, if there are roads, all roads are put on the list and they are worked on in phases, and you know that finally they will reach my area. So this will not encourage colleagues that that's what should be our point as Ugandans, that let us focus on the common good that interests everyone, so that the issue of who comes from, who brings it, is not an issue at this time. That is my last one.
Thank you very much. Your argument throughout the discussion has been we need to focus on the common good. For the students or people who do law, they would term it as the utilitarian principle, that we focus on the common good and not look at what will derail us behind. That is the aspect of tribalism. And what Mr. Armstrong has been arguing, that we do not have to rely on the aspect of tribalism, but we hold individual persons accountable, be it you are a Muganda, be it you are Choli, be it you are Musoga, be it you are Munyankole. All should be held accountable for the individual errors and personal interests that they're pursuing instead of the public interest. Mr. Mike Musola, Mr. Mike Kassola argued otherwise, that tribalism isn't the issue. People need change, and the issue of service delivery still runs also in his argument. And Mr. Obich Dennis also argues the same, that we need to deliver services. And for him, tribalism is a huge sentiment that he raises in his argumentations. Otherwise, it has been wonderful having you all on this wonderful discussion. Oh, Mr. Mike Kassola has joined us again. So let's just have him quickly give us his concluding remarks, and then we can wind it out, for just because he has gone off. Mr. Mike, kindly, we are concluding, but let's have you give us your concluding remarks and we call off the conversation. Mr. Mike Kassola, kindly give us your concluding remarks.
Thank you so much. as I said, Uganda is not a country inclined on tribalism. Uganda is a country where people love each other. Only politicians want to mislead their populations to go into tribal fights. I was saying like this, you know, a country like Rwanda, we had genocide. Tribalism can be a very dangerous thing. Tribalism can be very dangerous, and individuals drive people to that. Individual politicians drive people to that. I would try to look for some video which I watched one time when Mwalimu Julius Nyerere was saying, Rwanda, people talk of the Bahutu, people talk about the Batusi. We don't have those tribes there. The people of Rwanda are Rwandese, but the resources are making them fight each other, killing themselves and causing genocide around. So these are individual actions. And one of the reasons for that, there are about two reasons. One is resources. Two, people want to be cushioned politically by their own tribes, because if he knows that I am from Ankole, I'm from Lango, and the people of Lango, if they give me a block vote, then I'm going to win this election. Otherwise, people of Uganda, I don't see any tribalism. I'll tell you give you an example. If we got a courageous person to take on President Museveni, assuming, I don't wish him to die, but assuming that Kyagulanyi passes on, or Kyagulanyi disappears from the political scene, the vacuum will not go with him. The vacuum will actually become bigger, and anybody who shows the courage to take on President Museveni will be the person they rally around. So that is it. There is no tribalism in Uganda on a large scale. It is only manufactured by politicians for their selfish ends. And as my friend said, one of my friends, Timothy, said, if we have roads everywhere in the country, if we have good medical services in the country, if we have good schools in the country, if jobs are available for everybody in the country and are distributed evenly, you will not see such a thing happen. We shall continue as a good community, as a nation, and move forward towards development. So that is what I can say in conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been very wonderful having you all in this wonderful conversation. I've taken keen notice and learned quite a lot from you, my elders, and it has been very wonderful. And I would like to say, let us continue having these discussions. We don't have to fuel conversations of hate, but rather spread the message of love. And we also ought to hold our leaders accountable, as it was submitted by Mr. Timothy, but also ran through the arguments of all the panelists today. Otherwise, this conversation has been brought to you by Setup for Constitutional Governance, aired on Civic Space TV. I've been your host or moderator for today. My name is Douglas Onen. It's been wonderful having you on. Please do watch and subscribe to our channel. Otherwise, see you again, same time, same place next week. Bye-bye, and have a blessed week.